The French Revolution, from 1787 to 1799, wasn't just a chapter in French history. It was a seismic event that shattered the old world and laid the foundations for the new. It marked the definitive end of absolute monarchy in France and triggered social and political upheavals that echoed across the globe. But what pushed a nation to the breaking point? The roots of this conflict ran deep, with a failing economy and a society starkly divided by class. The ideas of the Enlightenment, promoting natural rights, equality, and justice, provided the intellectual ammunition for what was to come. The immediate spark, however, was a financial meltdown. The French state, built on the absolute power of Louis XIV, was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. The monarchy's failure to get the privileged classes to pay new taxes forced the king to summon the Estates General in 1789. By then, the financial crisis had become an existential one. People weren't just asking for reform. They were demanding the complete removal of all privilege from the body politic. This elite crisis was eagerly seized upon by a public armed with the powerful theories of the Enlightenment. The first major revolutionary act happened not in a palace, but in an indoor tennis court. On June 20, 1789, representatives of the common people, the Third Estate, found themselves locked out of their usual meeting hall. So they gathered and took the famous tennis court oath, vowing not to disband until a constitution was established. This single act shifted sovereignty from the king to the nation's representatives. Their political victory was soon backed by popular force. After King Louis XVI fired his popular finance minister, Jacques Necker, fears of a military crackdown spread like wildfire through Paris. On July 14, 1789, crowds searching for weapons stormed the Bastille, an old fortress prison that symbolized the tyranny of the monarchy. The fall of the Bastille solidified the authority of the new National Constituent Assembly. In the wake of this victory, the Assembly produced its masterpiece, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, in August 1789. Inspired by the American Revolution, it declared that all men had natural rights to liberty, property, security, and the right to resist oppression. Initially, the goal was a constitutional monarchy, a system where the king would share power. But this dream was shattered by the king himself. On the night of June 20, 1791, King Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, and their children tried to flee Paris. They hoped to reach a border fortress, rally support, and crush the revolution. But they were recognized and arrested in a small town called Varennes. The news of the king's escape attempt sent a shockwave across France. The realization that their king had betrayed the revolution was a turning point. It destroyed the monarchy's credibility and discredited the moderate revolutionaries who had backed him. Republicanism, once a fringe idea, now became the dominant goal. The king's flight to Varennes put the revolution on a fast track. By 1792, the monarchy was officially abolished, and on September 22nd, the First Republic of France was born. But the new government, the National Convention, was immediately torn apart by internal conflict. On one side were the radical Jacobin, led by figures like Maximilien Robespierre, who wanted a strong centralized government and social equality. Opposing them were the more moderate Girondins, who favored a less centralized bourgeois republic. The convention's first major task was to decide the fate of the former king, now known simply as Citizen Louis Capet. He was put on trial for high treason in December 1792. The vote was incredibly close, but he was condemned to death by a narrow majority. On January 21, 1793, Louis XVI was executed by guillotine. This act of regicide sent a clear message. There was no turning back. It also united the monarchies of Europe against France, leading to the formation of the First Coalition. With civil war raging internally and foreign armies at its borders, the radical Montagnards declared that terror was the order of the day on September 5, 1793. This period, the Reign of Terror, was driven by the belief that national survival required absolute political unity. Any dissent was branded as treason. A powerful body called the Committee of Public Safety, with Robespierre as its leading voice, took virtual dictatorial control. The violence escalated dramatically with the Law of 22 Prairial, which stripped suspects of their right to a public trial or legal defense. This kicked off the Great Terror, a period of mass executions. In total, around 300,000 people were arrested, and 17,000 were officially executed. But as France's armies started winning battles abroad, the justification for such extreme internal repression began to crumble. The excesses of the terror turned many against its leaders. On July 27, 1794, Robespierre himself was arrested and executed, along with his key allies. This event, known as the Thermidorian Reaction, brought the Reign of Terror to an end and shifted power towards the army. After the bloodshed of the Terror, France desperately craved stability. In October 1795, a new government called the Directory was established. It was a five-man executive committee chosen by a new two-house legislature. The Directory was Republican, but it was a government for the moderate, property-owning bourgeoisie. Its new constitution limited voting rights, showing a deep distrust of the mass democracy that Jacobin had championed. But the Directory was riddled with problems from the start. It struggled with a failing economy and was notoriously corrupt. The government frequently had to use military force and bend its own constitutional rules just to stay in power, even nullifying election results. This constant reliance on the army was its fatal weakness, especially with a charismatic and ambitious general like Napoleon Bonaparte rising through the ranks. Widespread frustration with the Directory's incompetence and corruption set the stage for another change. Seeing his opportunity, Napoleon Bonaparte, using his military fame and political connections, staged a coup on November 9, 1799. This bloodless takeover, known as the Coup of 18 Brumaire, swept away the failing Directory and replaced it with a new government called the Consulate. Napoleon quickly secured the top position as first consul, concentrating power in his own hands. This moment effectively marked the end of the French Revolution, transitioning France from a turbulent republic to an authoritarian regime under military rule. So, what is the lasting legacy of this tumultuous decade? The French Revolution was far more than a local affair. It systematically dismantled the old order of monarchy, clergy, and aristocracy. Its core ideals, liberty, equality, fraternity, became the building blocks for modern nations and the concept of nationalism itself. Documents like the Declaration of the Rights of Man became a blueprint for liberation movements and representative governments worldwide. Yet, the revolution holds a dark paradox. While it gave us the foundational principles of modern democracy, like national sovereignty and universal rights, it also pioneered the terrifying methods of state-sponsored terror and mass execution to enforce a single ideology. The ultimate failure of its constitutional and republican experiments meant that the revolution, after destroying the old authority of a king, ultimately replaced it with the new authority of a military dictator. The French Revolution remains a powerful, complex, and enduring story of the struggle for freedom and the dangerous paths it can sometimes take. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into history, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more.